G'day everybody. Today's video is going to be on roadworthies for trucks in particular. So what I'm doing is I'm going to walk through the process that I take when I am doing an inspection for a roadworthy on a truck. It's going to demonstrate pretty much everything you need to look for that I can think of anyway. There may be a couple of things that get missed, but this will be just the gist of what you can look for if you want to do a roadworthy on your own truck before you actually take it in to get a roadworthy done, because they sting you however many hundreds of dollars it is to actually go in and have a roadworthy inspection on your truck. Once you've had a roadworthy inspection, you only get a set amount of days in Victoria to complete your repairs and take it back for your final inspection. I can't remember if it's 7 days or 14, but basically if you've got a truck, have the roadworthy done, you need to do a heap of repairs and you can't get parts within 7 days, then you've got to go and get it re-roadworthied and then go through the process again, because Vic roads are a bunch of pricks. And basically I think it's to do with they give you such a short amount of time because they don't want older trucks on the road, and they know that parts are going to be harder for people to get for older trucks, so it'll deter you from fixing up your old truck because it'll cost you a fortune basically. So I'm going to walk you through the process of what to look for, what to check, so that you can have a list already of things that need to be repaired on your truck before you go in for a roadworthy, and you can have the repairs already done. Take it in there and they may pick a couple of little things that you missed, but you would hope that the things they do pick, maybe one or two, and you'd be able to repair them pretty quick and not have to have a first inspection, if that makes sense. So the truck we will be working on today is a 1991 Isuzu FSR 450 crew cab truck. Mum's horse truck is what it is. And we're going to go right through it, pretty thorough, pick everything we need to pick, and I'll talk about some things that they will pick and things that might get past them, because roadworthy can be one of those confusing things where people will think, oh, that's not a roadworthy issue, and technically it is. And sometimes people who do roadworthy inspections will pick things that don't necessarily make the truck unroadworthy. So anyway, we will crack into it and go through the process and what you need to look for. This will be probably a long video. Yeah, so the first thing I usually do when I'm doing a roadworthy is check the lights. It's the most obvious thing to look for when you're doing one. It's the first thing they'll be checking when they do the roadworthy. They'll check all your lights. Every light on the vehicle has to be working, unless it has spotlights that have been fitted after factory. So like if you've mounted spotlights on your bull bar, on your roof or something, they don't have to work. It's best though that they do, because if they will check them, and if you've got one spotlight not working and the other one does, they'll be like, fix that. So if you do have them, just have them working, but they technically don't have to, as far as I'm aware. In Victoria, it may be different to what other states do across the country, but they're sort of roughly similar, but they may be different. So you want to check indicators, park lights, headlights, high beams, your stop lights. Your reverse lights also need to be working if it's got them. If it has a beeper, the beeper needs to work. All clearance lights, so side clearance lights, which I'll show you. There's 3 up there on the top of the box. One down here. So they all need to be working. You can't have them hanging off. They have to be secured and they all have to work. This one is red and orange. So red has to face rear, orange has to face the front. If they're, no, you can't have, I'm pretty sure you can't have white lights on the side, but any white lights all have to face forwards. You can't have white lights facing rearwards or outwards, I'm pretty sure. Any white lights have to face the front. And usually if your truck has white lights, they'll be on the front of the body. This one doesn't have them. They'll be on the front of the body, basically where that torch is. There'll be like a white light there. As long as they're facing forward and not outwards or backwards, they'll be fine. But yeah, all your lights have to work, and yeah, you can't have them hanging off or damaged. They also need to be, depending on the style of lights, ones like these, which look okay, have the reflective backing behind the glass. That all needs to be like in good condition. It can't be like flaking off or falling apart. It needs to be reflective still. But these ones look okay. So yeah, they won't be like this on all trucks, but you can see it's sort of a little bit of pitting happening there. That's fine. But like if that was the whole thing and it wasn't reflecting back at us, that would be an issue, and they'd probably pick it, depending on how picky you are. It all comes down to how picky the inspector is when you're doing these sort of things. I know when I was doing them, I was pretty bloody picky. But, you know, there's people out there who give them enough money and they'll let anything through. All right, so we're inside the cabin now. So things we need to check inside the cabin are dash lights, seeing as we're still on the subject of lights. And when I say dash lights, I mean all the backing lights for all your gauges and your speedo, they all need to work. So everything needs to be lit up. It's hard to tell because it's broad daylight. I can't really tell. I can sort of see them coming on and off, but pretty sure they all work. All that needs to work. The lights behind your heating stuff, so to show you where the fan are or your heating, that also needs to work, because apparently that needs to be lit up, because it can affect your ability to drive the vehicle safely if you can't tell where the switch is for the demister. So the demister needs to work. Doesn't need to blow air onto you, because that's not a roadworthy requirement, but it needs to be able to blow air onto the windscreen to defrost your windscreen. This fan isn't working, so that's something that I'll have to pick, and that'll have to be rectified. I can't remember if it actually has to blow hot air. I don't think I ever really picked it for blowing hot air, because you've got to sit there with the engine running, and that's not, and I'm pretty sure that's not a roadworthy requirement, that it's got to be hot. It just has to blow air onto your windscreen. But nevertheless, it's not working, so that's got to be done. And it does have to blow it onto the windscreen, so you need to make sure that that works, which I don't know if this does. Other things we need to check for is the windscreen. It's sort of hard to tell because it's covered in bugs. But you need to check for any cracks, chips, bullseyes, heavy sandblasting. So if it has like a lot of little tiny marks that show up when the windscreen's clean, they'll pick it. But yeah, you can't have any chips or any cracks in it. Any cracks, any chips, they'll pick it straight away. Yeah, your windscreen's basically got to be perfect. Windscreen wipers need to work, which they do, and the washers also need to work. But as you can see, the windscreen's pretty dirty, so if it was dirty like that, you'd just wash it, so that when they do it, it doesn't look like the windscreen wipers can't clean your windscreen, because if the wipers aren't wiping it nicely, they'll pick that and say you need new wiper blades. So that's all got to work, and you need to have the sprayers working as well. That's a requirement too. Same thing for mirrors. All your mirrors need to be in good condition, can't be broken, and can't be like have the backing behind the mirrors all faded or damaged, and they can't be loose. They need to be all in good working order, which these ones are. So that's not a drama. Also door seals, I think this one's all right. They need to seal. You can't have like all the rubber around the doors hanging off. They need to actually seal against that. I can't remember what their reasoning is. I don't know if it's to keep water and stuff out, or if it's to do with exhaust fumes getting into the cabin, but they need to be in good condition, which these ones all are. As you can see, down here is usually a culprit for door seals falling apart, because everybody puts their feet here and like nicks the rubber seal. It usually wrecks those. So if that's all torn apart, usually got to replace those. But that's all in pretty good condition. And you got to check them on all the doors. Alright, another thing we want to check is the floor. By the floor I mean the actual matting itself, so the cover. As you can see, this is in pretty good condition. It doesn't get used that much because it's a horse truck, so there's no real damage. But any tears, if you can see like the bare floor through it, usually they'll pick that. And again, the main area you're going to see damage is driver's side, around the pedals, this section here. But that's pretty good. There's no reason why they should pick that. That's all covered nicely. Seats, so this one will fail because this is all torn up. That needs to be all covered over, can't be damaged. You can get away with it if you put a seat cover over it, that is good enough, or you can go get the seat redone, but you can't have any tears in it, and the seat base needs to be in good condition. You can't have like springs or metal poking through it. Also needs to be secured. This one isn't. Sometimes you can get away with that, they won't check it, but that's pretty loose, so that may need to be fixed. Seat belts as well. All your seat belts need to work if the vehicle is fitted with them. If it's not fitted with seat belts, and by fitted I mean if the truck or car as well came with no seat belts, then that's perfectly fine. If it was built with no seat belts, that's fine. It just has to, if it comes with seat belts, they have to be in it and they have to work. And also they have to do the lock. which that one does, so that's all good. Has to plug in, obviously, not come out, and it has to come out and it has to retract all the way up. If it hangs down and doesn't retract, they'll pick that. But that one works all fine. It needs to be also secured properly. For some reason the bolt on this one's loose, so we'll have to tighten that. It's also loose down there. I don't know what the hell to go with this truck. You reckon the bloke who serviced it would check these things? The same goes for in the back, because this is a crew cab. That works. I'll have to check that they all plug in. Same with your lap sash style seatbelts that just go across. They just have to make sure they're plugged in and they're secure. These should be all fine, but I'll check them. And also need to check the floor in here. And that's pretty much it. I'll show you a couple more things, but that's the basics of your cabin. You just need to have it pretty neat and tidy. All the seats are good, seatbelts are good, all lights work, demister, all that sort of stuff. All your sort of dash things are working. All right, just because we're in the cabin and this is an issue that this truck's got, we'll talk about it. Rust in the body. So this is a bit of a pain in the ass in this truck. You can't have any structural rust in your truck. That means chassis, body, anything like that. It doesn't matter so much about the horse box on this thing, because it's not really part of the truck, as long as the frame on it's all right underneath. So if anybody can get underneath and find rust in it, they might pick it, but things that they can't see, they won't. You'll be right. But we have some rust in the roof here, like actual proper holes, and that will, yeah, that'll get picked. You can't have anything like that. Now, it sort of can be hard to argue with them what's structural and what's not, but that is actually structural because it's a part of sort of the frame of the cabin, because it goes across the front of the windscreen and it's the part of the roof. If it was just like a hole in the center of the roof, I don't think that could be called structural, or a hole like in the center of the door. I don't think that could be structural either. But any rust, you sort of want to dial it up and make it look not too bad, because people will get upset about that and they'll get picky. But yeah, that definitely will have to be repaired. Also, these little dicky seats are in the center of the truck sometimes, they have to work as well. Seatbelt has to obviously click in and everything. It has to be secured when it's folded up, because that's part of the truck and it's a proper seat in it. It has to all work the same as every other seat. Right, a couple more things in the cabin that I just remembered. Horn needs to work. Now it sounds like something off a car from the 1930s. It's technically making a sound that's audible, so I would say that would pass, but they might pick it because it's not clear. Anyway. And all your dash warning lights need to work. This has a bulb check on it because it's an old Jap truck and they used to do that. So we can see they're all working. Some of them won't come on if they're not required to. Park brake isn't working, so that bulb behind the park brake light will have to be replaced because they'll need that to work. Obviously, indicators need to work. High beam light needs to work. So we need to make sure we replace that park brake bulb light. On these, they're not very hard. You pull the dash out, pull the little globe out, put a new little globe in, easy. Another couple of things, pedals. Pedal rubbers need to be in good condition. They can't be worn and smooth. This one's fine, it's almost brand new. Accelerator pedal is like worn there, but I'm not sure if they'll pick that. Might get away with that one. But yeah, your brake pedal's always got to be in pretty good nick. They can't be all worn out like that. They'll pick that. And steering wheels needs to just be secure. You shouldn't be able to twist the gripping part of the wheel, which sometimes you can. This one's all right. If you can twist it, that's a roadworthy issue. You'll have to replace your steering wheel, but that's all good. That shouldn't be a problem at all. Rightio, on the outside of the truck, all we're really looking for is any damage to panels, rust, things hanging off it. This one's in pretty good nick. The only thing that's sort of questionable is these weather seals for the windows. I don't think that's a roadworthy issue. And I'd probably argue it if they did pick it. But yeah, you just want to check that everything's sort of in pretty good nick. Mud guards need to be all secured, can't be broken. Same with mud flaps, it needs to have them on there. They can't be missing. They will pick them if they don't. This one does have holes for a front mud flap, which I'm not sure if they'll pick that or not, because it hangs down low enough, but they may do. So we may have to put a little bit of rubber on there. Just keep them happy. You also just want to have a good walk around, just check it's in pretty good nick. Probably want to clean your truck as well before you take it in. The cleaner it is, the better it's going to look. Just check the mud guards. Want to be checking that nothing's hanging off underneath, and that our steps are secured, which they all are. There's no damage to your steps. Yeah, in that regard it looks pretty good, and I know that the rear mud guards and mud flaps are all good on this, but yeah, a few more things to keep an eye on. Alright, so we've put the cab up on the truck and we're going to check some under cab stuff. First thing I'm going to check, because I've got Dad here to give me a little bit of a hand with it, is ball joints down here at the tie rod ends. So you can't have any movement in the ball joint. Also the rubber boot can't be split or perished, has to be all sealed up. So what I'm going to do is get Dad to rock the steering, and then we'll be able to tell whether or not that has got any free play in it. You just start rocking it, please. So as you can see, that's pretty solid. We can't see the bottom of the ball joint moving independently of the arm. That looks pretty solid. So we'll come over here, check the ball joint on this side, and we'll check the drag link as well. Just get you to rock that again. That's also pretty solid. We also have the drag link up the top, just get rocking it. And that one has got movement. It's a spring loaded style, so that might need some sort of adjustment maybe, or it could be worn. As you can see it moving there. And up here as well. That one looks to be worn. So those couple of ones might need to be replaced. But yeah, basically the best way to check them is just to have someone rocking your steering, and you just visually check it, and you can grab them and see if they're loose. But yeah, that's them. Shock absorbers are another thing that needs to be checked. For looseness in the bushes, by just giving them a twist, we can see that one's alright. This one twists, so these top bushes may be worn, or we may get away with tightening that. Depends if they pick it. You can also not allowed to have any oil leaks or weeps on the shock absorbers. They're all good on this one in this case. Also need to check for oil leaks anywhere on the engine. Anything to do with engine, transmission, anything. No oil leaks, not allowed to have them. And an oil leak is defined in a roadworthy as dripping. So if it's wet around somewhere where it's leaking, that doesn't count. As I'll show you here. You can see on top of the transmission there is some sort of leak, but it's just wet, it's dampened it. That's not classified as an oil leak. It has to be dripping on the ground. You have to be able to see it physically dripping onto the ground to call it an oil leak. People will get picky with this, and you can argue the fact. Usually if you can wash it and bring it in clean, if it's not completely caked in oil and it's got no like little drips hanging on it, you'll get away with it. But you can't have it like dripping onto the ground. Be the same case with this leak here on the fuel pump. So obviously over time a bit of oil is weeping out of the fuel pump and it's just dampening it. We'll give that a clean, but you'll get away with that. That's not a proper leak. It's not dripping anywhere. You need to check for any coolant leaks. Any coolant leaks they'll pick. Also cab bushes. So where these ones sit on rubber pads, you want to check they're in good nick. They're all fine. Up here as well, they're in pretty good condition. You can still read that it says rear and that there's an arrow, so they're not wearing out very quick. Same with the cab mount bushes, which are just at the end of my finger there. You just want to check that they're not got a heap of up and down movement. If you chuck a pry bar in there and try and chuck it up and down, you just don't want to see the cab like lifting on the bush up and down like that, and you just want to check that the bushes aren't cracked. They'll usually be some sort of rubber bush. They're pretty relatively easy to check, and you can usually do it with the cabin down. You can peer through the grill at the front and you should be able to see it. Tyres, most obvious thing to check on a roadworthy. You just want to check that the tread is in good condition. These are pretty new, so you can see that they are pretty flat across the top. They're not angled off. There's no scalloping, which is like when you have little ridges around one edge. There's no splits in the sidewalls that they'll pick all that sort of thing. This tyre's pretty bloody good. Same with the rim. Don't want any cracks in the rim. If your wheel nuts look like they're loose, tighten them. They shouldn't pick them because they're not allowed to put, well, they can if they wanted to, but you're not meant to check if things are tight. It's just a visual inspection, but just if they do look loose, tighten them. If they have little rust stains, it usually means they're loose. These tires are all pretty good, and you just want to have a general inspection of the underneath of the cab as well. This has got heat shield, so we can't really see if there's any rust or not, but there shouldn't be. But you just want to check that there's no rust underneath the bottom of your cabin, and that again all the steps that hang up underneath it are secured, which they are. And yeah, just a visual check. Anything that looks iffy will probably get picked, but it's pretty tidy, this old engine. There's no major leaks on it and everything looks to be secured. We also need to check the transmission mounts to the body, which is one over there, and one in there, and that's a rubber mount. You just want to check there's no cracks. It does look like the crack, but they're just marks from when being in the mold, the rubber mold. But you want to check that they're not split or perished. You can also put a pry bar in there and try and wedge it up and down and see what the bush does, or the mount, sorry. If the steel part of the mount is separated from the rubber, it's buggered. But that's another way you can check them. Same thing goes for engine mounts. This is just a classic rubber style engine mount. You can see that's in pretty good nick. Doesn't appear to have any splits in it. You can do the same thing with the pry bar, put it in there and try and wiggle the engine away from the chassis, and you'll see if it separates. Yeah, the roadworthy inspector will check those things as well. They may get it in there with a pry bar and do it. I used to. Alright, we're looking at the spring pins and bushes currently. I've made a separate video on this, on how to check spring pins and bushes, which I'll put a link in the description if anybody wants to have a more detailed description of how you do it. But basically you just get a pry bar in between your spring and your shackle, and you pry it up and down. It's going to be hard because I'm holding the camera to do it. There is the slightest little bit of movement on this pin here. Now the truck will have specifications as to what is allowable by the manufacturer, which is what they should go off of. I reckon that'll probably pass. We'll jam a heap of grease in there. But you want to go around and check all of them, that there's no up and down movement, no side to side movement, the pins aren't loose. They'll check all that. So here we are again on the other side. Put our pry bar in the spring. Oh, that one's got a fair bit of movement in it. I'll try and set it up so you guys can actually see. Hopefully you guys can see that alright. You can see how much movement is in that. They'll probably pick that. Hopefully they don't though. And you would do the same on your front as well. So you just want to be checking like that. For your spring pins and bushes, we've got to do the same on the rear because it's a leaf spring rear, not airbags or anything like that. So I'll do the same. I'll do the same up the back here, and we'll move on to the next thing. Alright, I've got a jack under the front axle, jacking up this corner wheel. What we're checking here now is bearings and kingpins. So I've also made a video on checking bearings, but all we really need to do to check bearings is foot at the bottom, hand on the top, and push alternating between your hand and your foot. See if you can feel any looseness in the bearing. That one's pretty tight. So that's all good. Kingpin is next. It's gonna be harder to show you guys exactly what I'm doing here, but basically similar to checking the bearing. If the kingpins were really worn, when we were checking the bearing, we would feel it knocking. And one way to work out between the bearing and the kingpin is put your hand on the brake, which will lock the wheel in position, which locks the bearing in position. If you can still rock it with your foot on the brake, which you need 2 people, that means the kingpin's worn. Because when you're pushing on it and the bearing is locked up, the only thing that can move is the pivot point of the stub axle, which is the kingpin. So if it's going backwards and forwards like that, the kingpin and bushes are most likely worn. The other thing you want to check for is up and down movement in the kingpin, because it has a bearing, which is this part down the bottom on this particular model. Usually the bearing is at the bottom. And we want to check that it doesn't move up and down on the axle. So if the whole thing can move up and down like that, it means that it either needs to be re-shimmed or the bearing's starting to collapse. And the way we check that is you get a pry bar with an angle like this one, stick it under the wheel. It's a bit hard on the dirt because the ground's soft, better on concrete. And if you can put your bar under it and you can feel it with your hand on top of the wheel, if you can feel it while prying it going up and down, then your kingpin needs to either be shimmed or it needs new bearings. But if you were doing it, you'd replace all the bushes, you'd replace everything, because there's such a pain in the ass to do. You just do everything all at once. But this one seems to be fine. So I'll put the jack on the other side of the axle and do the same thing. You want to put the jack only jacking up one wheel. If you put it in the center, the truck will rock and you won't be able to get an accurate reading as to what's worn. All right, I've set you guys up on top of the axle. You're looking at the side of the kingpin there. I'm checking the left-hand side of the truck. I've noticed this one's got a bit of up and down movement, so I'll show you what that does look like. So I've got the angled part of my bar under the wheel, and I'm lifting that up and down, and as you can hopefully see, the grease is moving in and out because the kingpin is either wearing the axle or it needs to be re-shimmed. But that, if they check it, they may pick it. Hopefully they don't. Yeah, with these sort of things, it always comes down to hopefully the person you get is lazy and they don't pick that, because kingpins are a pain in the ass to do and they're quite costly and also very labor intensive. But if that was me, I would probably pick that. You can go through the specifications of your truck, find out what the allowable clearance is using like a dial indicator or something. You might be able to measure that, but yeah, 9 times out of 10 you're just going to replace them or repair the issue. So that's pretty much everything covered on axles, to be honest, or front axles and steering. We've checked everything to do with this truck. Same would go for your rears. I've checked the pins and bushes on it. If it's got shock absorbers, same thing, check your shock absorbers. But the rear end on this is fine. So we'll grab something to lay on, we'll get under the truck and look what horrors lie before us. Rightio, laying under the truck, as you can probably work out. Gonna look at some things under here. This is where the bulk of your hidden stuff is gonna be that you didn't know you had. So this is when you wanna get down on the ground. I'm laying on an old Australian Post bag. You could probably use a creeper if you're laying on concrete, which is probably what you wanna be doing. But this is where you want to get down here with a torch and a pry bar and have a really good look, because you'll find a bunch of hidden stuff you didn't know you had. First thing we're going to look at is the oil leak on this transmission. So as you can see, it's actually pretty wet underneath it. If I can run my finger along it, I've taken up a heap of transmission fluid. So this one would have a leak, and I think it's just this fitting here. Just needs to be undone, resealed, and then give this all a good blast to make sure that it's clean. And we should be pretty safe, but you don't want anything dripping off it, and that's wet enough that it is making a little drip just at the end there. It's not dripping on the ground, and there's no marks here, and this truck's been parked here for about 45 minutes, so technically wouldn't say it's leaking, but just because it's an easy fix of undoing a fitting and resealing it and washing it, you just do it, because then they won't question you, and it'll look better as well, and you won't be losing oil. So same thing goes again. We're looking at the bottom of the engine here. Check for oil leaks, wrench filter, sump, anything that's dripping needs to be fixed. Check crankcase for any like seals around there that are leaking as well. We're also looking at springs and U-bolts. Just want to make sure no U-bolts or spring leaves are broken. Make sure they sort of look like they're tight. Again, they won't check that they're tight. They won't put a spanner on there usually. They might hit them with a hammer. But if you can get under there and check that they're tight, it's one less thing they're going to look at. Again, we're looking at the drag link, the tie rod end, sorry, so we can grab it and twist it. Now that's allowable movement. It can twist backwards and forwards. That's how they work, but you shouldn't be able to lift it up and down, which you can't on this one. So that's pretty good. That's all solid and looks all right. Now, looking at the back of your wheels, you want to check that there's no brake fluid leaks. This one looks all right. It's got a few like areas where some grease has been. But you'll usually see all the bottom of your backing plate will be wet. So you want to check all them, check that your lines are all in good condition, check your brake shoes. These ones look all right from what I can see. So that where you can see the line through the center, the bottom is the drum, the top is the shoe. There should be usually a wear line on the shoe, which it's going to be hard for me to point out to you. But those shoes look like they have, yeah, about 5, or maybe 8 mil if we're lucky. So plenty of life left in them. Same goes for the top. On these ones there's a top inspection hole. Most people are lazy, they won't check up there. But you want to at least check your bottom ones and make sure that there's no leaks so they don't ping you. Also on brakes, you want to make sure that the truck stops. They will pick you if it doesn't. They have to have a brake testing machine usually. I'm pretty sure it's still required. And they'll have to do a brake test, and that'll give them a certain reading as to how well the brakes are working. Now it's hard for me to replicate because I don't have a brake tester, and I know that the brakes in this work, but the best way to do it is just to go around, adjust all your brakes so that they all brake evenly, and when they do a brake test, it should hopefully work. Unless you have some sort of issue with your brakes, then they will pick it. But I'm pretty confident that this thing will pass on a brake test. It's just a simple adjust them with a screwdriver on these ones and make sure that the wheel spins freely. Do it up till the wheel grabs, back it off a couple of turns, and then you should be laughing. But that's one of the other things they'll check, is how well your brakes perform. They don't technically take it for a drive and check them, but they'll have some sort of machine that they'll use to do the brake test with in their yard or inside their workshop. So that's another thing you want to be mindful of, is the performance of your brakes. Right, so we're checking the tail shaft here. Here's the center bearing. There's a rubber bushing in this one. So what we do is we try and lift it up like a bench press, up and down. There's a tiniest little bit of movement in that rubber. That's just the actual rubber itself. It has a little bit of give. So that's fine. The bearing should be fine in there. Same thing for unis. Just try and lift the tail shaft up and down. Any movement in there, you should be able to feel it, and try and wriggle it side to side, twist it around, try and twist it. That should be pretty solid. Same thing on your slip joint on your tail shaft. So what we're checking here is for side to side movement. Now this one actually does have some, you can hear it, the grease squelching in it. But what that is the splined part is twisting on each other, and that means that the splines either in there or on this part are worn, so they can move like that. So we'll have to, if that gets picked, we'll have to replace it. In fact, we'll probably just replace it anyway, because it's more of a safety thing, and it'll just get worse over time, because you can see that it can move within itself. Also underneath the body is where you'll be checking the chassis. You want to check for any structural rust, so like surface rust like that is perfectly fine. But any rust where it's got a hole in your chassis, or see how there's two chassis lips here that meet together, if those have rust in between them and they've expanded out, they'll pick that. We want to check welds on the body, so this is the frame of the horse box. Any welds they'll pick, so just go around, check all your welds, make sure it's all good, and that there's no rust holes in the body, because they may pick those as well. But this one looks pretty good. A little bit of surface rust on the chassis rails, but nothing to get worried about. Also chassis U-bolts. So these are the U-bolts that hold the box to the chassis. You want to check that they're tight. These are all pretty good. They'll pick them for not being tight, and that's easy enough. Just go around with a spanner, just jam it on there, make sure they're done up pretty tight. The exhaust, so here's the muffler. Can't have any holes in your muffler. Same goes for the pipe. Can't have any holes in the pipe other than at the end of it. They'll pick you for exhaust fumes leaking out everywhere. So that's pretty simple. Just go along, check there's no holes, and you'll be right. Another thing to look for on the chassis and the body is the body timbers. So that's the wood that sits in between the box and the chassis. You just need to check that they're not rotted through or fallen out. These are sort of average, but they'll probably be right. But yeah, if they're like falling out or completely missing, you'll need to put new ones in. Rightio, we're down here at the back axle. Just having a look at that. You want to make sure there's no leaks, obviously, on the back axle. No hub leaks, brake leaks. That one has a little brake leak, I think, over on that wheel over there, one of the wheel cylinders. I'm going to show you something on the rear shackle bins. So as you can see up there, hopefully, on the left-hand side of the shackle, actually maybe just here, so there's a bit of a gap between the shackle and the pin. They may pick that for being a little bit too much movement in between. You may need to put a shim in there or replace these shackles, because they will wear out on the sides. But that's just one thing to keep an eye on as well, that there's no gap. Pump a heap of grease in there and you should be right though for a small gap like that. Rightio, so we're looking again over here at the back axle. Better view of the brake shoes in here. Checking the brake shoes as well. They look alright. Also checking the adjusting holes where these wheel cylinders are. This is a good way to see if there's a leak. It's hard for you guys to see, but we can see the little adjusting wheel in that hole there. If that was all wet and covered in crap, we'd know there was a leak. It actually looks pretty dry, so maybe this leak isn't leaking. But you can tell there has been a leak though, because all the paint has peeled off of the backing plate, and that's what brake fluid will do. It'll wreck your paint. So there's been a leak here, all the paint's peeled off because of it. Alright, we're back from out under the truck, looking at the back of the number plate here. So here is the number plate light. As you can see, it's meant to be red with a clear lens here to project light onto the number plate, but you can see it's all faded and gone clear, and that, because the light globe is obviously just a normal light, that will appear being white at the back, so that's actually unroadworthy. that needs to be fully red, so that if you're looking at it, it looks red and there's only white shining onto there. So that will have to be replaced. Okay, so we've pretty much been over the whole truck. Checked a whole lot of things. If there's anything I've missed, let me know down in the comments. Obviously this is going to go in for a roadworthy. I can't do it here by myself, not allowed to. So this is going to go in for a proper one. We'll see what they pick, but I've picked a fair bit of stuff that we can fix before we take it in, and that's probably the best way to do it, because it gives you enough time to fix anything else that they pick before you need to bring it back in for your second inspection. So anything you think I've missed, let me know down in the comments, or anything else that you've had a roadworthy done in your truck and that you've discovered something that you didn't think was a roadworthy item, leave it down in the comments as well, because it could be interesting to know and someone else might get some help out of it. But yeah, I've been over pretty much everything, checked pretty much all the things that a roadworthy inspector is going to check. It depends how picky they are. They might get more in depth and they may not, but pretty much just go around, have a good look. Any leaks that are dripping on the ground, you want to fix them. You want to make sure the vehicle is nice and clean, washed, everything underneath is washed. The better it looks, the more lenient they might be. Obviously need to check wheels and tires, pins and bushes, all that sort of stuff. Make sure your chassis is in good condition. Make sure your cabin isn't full of rust and got holes everywhere. Windscreen's something that catches a lot of people out. Make sure there's no chips or cracks. And yeah, so hopefully that helps someone out there, that gives them a bit of a hand before they take their truck in for a roadworthy. You can also just get on the internet. It all should be available, what is roadworthy and what is required for one, on the internet, on Vic Roads, which is for Victoria, and don't know who they have for the rest of the country, but the information should be out there for every state. Just get on there, have a quick look, read through it, and you'll probably find a few things that you didn't realise were actually roadworthy requirements. But yeah, hopefully that helps someone out. And anyway, we'll leave it at that, and I'll catch you in the next one. All right.